record and then wanted it back. But what actually happened was I came back from the Atlantic and I thought, look, I'm done. I'd spent all of my 20s doing major expeditions. I got married 8 weeks later. And I thought, look, next chapter, I'll just continue to make documentaries. But they don't need to all be about me. I quite enjoyed just the filming and the television. So I spent 2 years working for BBC World, filming the build-up to the Commonwealth Games. Absolutely loved it. Got to travel the world, interview athletes, dream job. But I was kind of inspired, but jealous. I couldn't take myself out of that equation. I wanted to be doing what the athletes were doing, and the idea of holding the microphone for the next 30 years. So I came home and I said to Nikki, my wife, I said, I know I said I'm done, but I'm not done. At that point, I had watched with awe and with interest the record that I'd set back in the day, the 2006-2007. Had been not just pipped, but smashed, taken. Many people had gone for it. Sometimes 4 or 5 people a year had gone for it. And the record now stood at 123 days. So it was held by Andrew Nicholson, an Olympian from New Zealand. And so with no disrespect to Andrew Nicholson, I was never really trying to break his record. My mission from the start was to do the first fully supported circumnavigation race. How fast can you humanly get around the world? Selfishly, I just want one opportunity to put all my cards on the table and think, what is the ultimate? I don't want to look back when I'm 70, 80 and go, there was another level I could take that to. I always knew it wouldn't be the most fun thing I'd ever done. I always knew it would hurt like hell. But I just sort of thought, there's another level you could take this to. And the best possible expression for that is the world.
You talked about the support for this. This was not from being supported in America, which is my girlfriend making me burritos in the back of an RV. You would probably need a different level of support here. You were needing science. How did you go about preparing this team? How did you assemble it?
There was about 10 people at the heart of the project, split between logistics, media, and performance. But all told, there was about 40 people involved. And it was a massive project. People still see it as one guy on his push bike. But, the cost and complexity of this eclipses everything else I've ever done. My first recruit was a researcher. And he was nothing to do with cycling or sport. He was just somebody who I thought had the right attributes. And I just thought, here's somebody who is going to ask all the questions that nobody else asks. I thought, for me, it's what I would call my familiarity bias. I know this world too well. I've done this for too long, and I'll just do a version of what I've done before. You need somebody who comes in and sort of just says, well, why do you do it that way? Like, why have you always done it that way? And that started from the researcher looking in incredible detail at the routes, me going off with my sort of performance team in the lab and on the road and starting to figure out, optimals in terms of ride time, sleep pattern, food, hydration, the rest of it. Initially on my performance side, I had everyone, bike fitters, coaches, nutritionists, loads of people all feeding conversations into me. A, I didn't understand half of what they were saying. And B, their advice didn't always complement. So eventually I recruited one person, Laura Penhall, who was my performance manager. And every single conversation about performance went through Laura. So by the time we got to the start line, I'd quite successfully handed over all of this to my amazing team and just said, right, I'm just the bike rider. I'm not the boss. I'm not the decision maker. If I fail, we all fail. So my job is just to ride the bike. Your job is to get me around the world.
It's a lovely bit of humility there. I'm just a bike rider. For those who aren't adept at instant mental maths, 80 days, 80 days of cycling, that's a big number. 18,000 miles around the world, that's a very big number. Can you tell me how many miles a day you were needing to do, and how do you start to train for that?
So I was averaging 240 miles a day. So 240, for those who have, a lot of people have, say, ridden a century. If you ride a double century, it's a big day. Ride a 240, but that's not the trick. If you're fit, you can ride a 240. It's waking up 5 hours later and doing it again and again and again and again and again and again for 2.5 months. You've got to do it every day. And here's the other trick. To make 240 your average, you have to be able to ride through it regularly. So if 240 in any way becomes your target, it'll never become your average. So you have to regularly, without sort of it being a big deal, tap out 250s, 260s, even 270s. I did a 280. In the end, it was 75 days of riding, 3 days flights, 2 days contingency. So for every continent of the world, so Asia, Australasia, North America, and then back through Europe, we had 12 hours contingency for each continent. Now think about it, that might sound like a lot, but you could lose 6 hours with a flight delay. It's not hard to lose 12 hours on a continent.
Yeah, I followed this like every single day, and I was stressed for you when I was following it. You were the one doing the riding and also thinking about these potential contingency issues, health things, transport, just the unknown, wildlife. What sort of, how did you cope? What were these mental tricks that you did to keep yourself sane?
Well, it sounds blindingly obvious, but if you think of a given day, it's quite scary. If you think about the next country, if you think of, it's just too big. When you're so sleep deprived, and you'll know what it's like when you're tired, you go to idiot mode. If you've given yourself big questions to answer every day, I don't think anyone's tough enough. If you've built an escape hatch, you'll jump through it. So my mentality on the road is do all the big thinking before you start. Know what the plan is, and then just trust the plan. So I would never get to 240 miles and then stop. I would ride 16 hours. If it was -4 outside and the storm was raging, or it was a beautiful day and I had a tailwind, I was still going to do 16 hours. One day I would go 200 miles and the next day I would go 280. It didn't matter. If I couldn't believe that each of those was an equal success, then you're never going to make 240 your average. Whereas the opposite way of thinking about it is, hey, it's a great day, let's make hay. Let's go nuts, knock it out the park, and then on a tough day, hey, we'll protect ourselves, there'll be a better day, we'll make it up. And if you start playing that game, you're never going to hit your best possible average. So just don't give yourself any questions to answer. It's interesting because safety comes first for Laura and my performance team, absolutely well-being. But the wider team, I banned them asking me how I felt because of how brutal it was and how, everyone I met in my team, my performance, my logistics and my media team every day, but for a lack of knowing what to say to me, they would go, how are you feeling, Mark? And I was like, it doesn't matter, because whether I feel on top of the world or rock bottom, we are doing the same thing. So A, it's a boring question and I don't want to stop answering it. But B, it doesn't matter. Unless it's a conversation with my performance manager and I'm unsafe to carry on, how I feel doesn't enter the equation.
What did you say to yourself as you literally made that first pedal stroke?
Riding out of Paris at 4 o'clock in the morning, there was party revelers. It's busy at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. There was people who had cycled out to see me off. It was crazy. I was standing there on the start line with a few minutes to go, signing copies of my book and taking selfies, and I'm like, this isn't right. Like I should be totally in the zone. And yet I felt like I was at some event in the middle of the night in Paris. I wasn't sitting there going, oh, I've got 18,000 miles to race in the next 80 days. I was like, is everyone okay? Anyone got any more questions? It just wasn't. It wasn't an optimal headspace to start a race like that. And then even when I left, it was like all the filming and blah, blah. It probably took me to lunchtime on that first day to go, this is it. Right, okay. Let's do this. We're off on the world. Yeah,
you hadn't even gotten that far. When I say that far, you'd probably have gone about the best part of 2,000 miles when the first disaster struck.
Yeah, there was a couple of nasty crashes on the 80 days, which I guess could have ended it all in terms of the ambition. On day 9, 5:30 in the morning, in the dark, in the wet, and I went over the bars when I hit an unseen pothole, and it happened so fast. But the crash ended up sort of wobbly teeth. My canine tooth was quite badly chipped, and I'd fractured my elbow, my radial head. So I carried on quite quickly. I was back on the bike 35 minutes later, but definitely took a while to recover. It was also a fine balance when crashes like that happen, because you want to be safe, you got to look after yourself, but there's no point in going to a Russian hospital, spending half a day getting an x-ray and telling you what you already know. If you can operate the bike, if you're safe to ride the bike, you got to keep going, because you don't have that time to lose.
So if you struggled through the Russian roads, you got through the beautiful country of the Mongolian steppes.
Yeah.
It's one of the world's great wildernesses, and you had a lot of people immediately around you, but it's very different to normal human relations. Were you lonely?
Yeah, of course. When you're doing big expeditions like that, you've got a phenomenal amount of time in your own head. So you're right, I've got constant company. When I look back, every conversation, every purpose, everything is about making the bike go faster. But, you know, it's on you. It's a lonely place. It's a lonely place because I guess the thing which is hard to explain is your team can. Did you hear that crack? That was from the fracture.
Radial head. There you go.
It does that all the time. The thing with, even though the team are basically deciding on the project for you, if I get out the RV at 4 a.m. and I smile, everyone smiles. If I look worried, my team look worried. So that sort of emotional leadership, that sense of everyone looking to me for that quiet confidence that we are actually doing this, you can never delegate that. So is it lonely? It's lonely because you're scared of failing. You've set yourself up to do something like this. Everyone is working on your behalf to make this dream a reality. And, you don't want to let yourself and everyone else down.
I'm so surprised and flattered to come to the other side of the world and for people to know who I am and what I'm up to. It's brilliant, so thank you. Just a note about joining me on the bike.
Problem is, you don't really want to be around anyone else either.
I was struggling. 2 months in, I'm in the darkest place I've ever been as an athlete.
He's completely shot. And now people start appearing on the road, asking to cycle alongside him.
Most of the time it's cool and I appreciate the company, but understand on days like today.
So some people totally understood the mindset of the ultra-endurance bike rider and understood what I was putting myself through. Others, I'd say not to be too much of a diva, after 12 hours of riding, would just be super excited, join you and want to have like a 2-3 hour Q&A session.
I need to zone out. I need to stay in the zone.
And if anyone's ever run ultra-endurance or cycled ultra-endurance, it's quite hard to suddenly sort of be the ambassador, like you're at an event just chatting anecdotally about what it was like back in Mongolia. It's quite hard to push yourself really hard physically and psychologically and then just be, just shooting the breeze, chit-chat, answering questions, because you're hurting. You are pushing yourself. You're in a physically and mentally very difficult place.
Yeah, if you want to support me when it's pretty wild weather like this, come and give me a shout from the roadside. That's awesome. Brownies and cookies are always appreciated. There's been some good home-cooked donations in the recent days.
And we actually had to put a couple of messages out, especially when I had like howling headwinds going through the prairies, like really tough riding, just saying, look, people, thank you for all the support, the tens and tens of people who are coming out every day. Please support from the roadside. Please stop and chat to the crew, but please don't ride with me because I'm struggling to ride my bike and I just can't be the entertainment as well as the bike rider.
But please understand that I just need to be left to my own devices on a day like today because I need to stay in my own head just to ride hard against this.
Things weren't going well. He was tired, done in.
I thought I'd be starting to sort of rack it up towards the finish and really sort of push the last 2-3 weeks of the race. In actual fact, I'm going backwards here.
But then as he came up over the Pyrenees, which was the home straight,
I crashed quite hard. So on the Spanish side, I dropped the bike late at night, 10:30 at night, after a really tough day riding up from Madrid. So I was ill, I'd crashed, and then I sort of got into France in really heavy rain, really tough conditions. And you'll know what it's like from running. Anytime the weather or the conditions close in like that, your focus shortens considerably. So you're no longer dreamily thinking about tomorrow or the next day. You're just like, how do I keep going?
all you can think about is the road in front of you. Mark focused on the pedals below him, mile after mile after mile. But every mile was a mile closer to the finish line. And now Mark started to see people on the roadside.
and more people started to come out. Loads of expats, you know, loads of company. I didn't have a lot of time to sort of think about things myself. It was more reflecting other people's excitement, you know, the tens of people who were joining.